Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'll be showing you how I made this super easy robe with asymmetric sleeve and pockets. So let's get started. So you need the following measurements: your length, your hip, your back/shoulder, your armhole, your sleeve length, and your round sleeve. So here I have two rectangles. I'll start with the body, and for this I've cut the length of my robe plus sewing allowance by my hip plus 7 inches. So I added 7 inches to the measurement of my hip. So there I have 44 inches because my hip is 37 plus 7 inches, and this includes my sewing allowance as well. So to start, I'm folding my fabric lengthwise into, as you guys can see, and I'm just going ahead to pin it down because this is a very light fabric, so you want to be very careful. And then I'm going in to fold it again, and now I will take my length plus 1.5 inches as allowance, so 1 inch for the bottom and 1/2 inch for joining the shoulder seams together. Now I'm going ahead to take half of my shoulder measurement plus 1.5 inch, and this is because I want like a drop shoulder effect, so you can add more or use your exact measurement if you don't want a drop shoulder effect. Next I'm going in to mark out my neckline. So for this I measure 3 inches by 1 inch down, and now I'm going in to connect the 2 points together. Now on the shoulder points that we marked earlier, I went down by 1 inch to create like the shoulder slant because our body isn't straight. Now from that point I'm going down 9 inch to create what will serve as the armhole guide. And now I'm going ahead to measure the vertical measurement of my waist and my hip point. So I'm doing this because I'm going to have pockets on this robe, so this will help guide me. And after that I'm just going in to measure 1/4 of my hip measurement plus 1 3/4. So this already includes sewing allowance and ease, so I'm just measuring it up to that armhole point that we indicated. Now on the armhole line I'm going to divide that point into 2 to get the midpoint, and from that midpoint there I'll go ahead and connect it to the 11-inch mark that we indicated on the armhole point guide that we marked earlier. I hope you guys understand, but anyway you guys can see what I'm doing. So now I'm just going ahead to draw a straight line down, and this is because it's a robe, right? So it doesn't need to be fitted, but if you want yours fitted you can curve it at the waist point. So now I'm going 3 inches down to indicate my pocket notch, and once I'm done with that I'm just going ahead to cut out my pattern because I'm done with the pattern drafting. I'm done with the pattern drafting for the back. So now we'll separate it because we need to work on the front. So for the front I'm just going ahead to I'll create like a V neckline. So I'm going 12 inches down, and then I'll connect that to my neck point using my pattern master, and then create that V neckline and just open the middle, that's the center front as well. Because it's a robe, the center front has to be opened, right? So that's it. I have my front pattern and I have my back pattern. So now I'm going ahead to create my pocket, and for this I'm just making it 11 inches long and about 5 to 6 inches wide, just to make sure that I have enough room. So for this there's nothing really set in stone. I'm just going to measure 7 inches. That will be the entry point of my pocket, and then I will just freestyle the rest. As you guys can see, I'm just going to put my hand and just try to get a curve that I'm comfortable with. So just make sure that the entry point is straight, and you can just draw the curve for the other part, as you guys can see me doing here. So for this you need to cut 4 pieces, 2 for the front and 2 for the back. And now to connect it, just place right sides together on the side point. Remember the 3 inch beneath the waist that we marked. I'm just going to pin my pocket in place, so the 2 sides at the back and then the 2 front sides as well. So I'll go ahead now and sew right sides together, and after sewing I will just understitch my seam allowance to the inside of my pocket. So next I'm going ahead to connect my shoulder seam. So just pin everything down, that's the front and the back shoulder seam, and take it to your sewing machine to sew, as you guys can see me doing here. Next, to create the sleeves, I'm going ahead to measure my armhole because we'll need this to cut out our sleeve. So yeah, I have another rectangle, the second rectangle, and this is basically just my sleeve length by my round sleeve by 4, so I multiply that by 4 because we want the sleeve to be free. So now I'm going ahead to fold it in 2 and then fold it in 2 again because I'll be cutting the 2 sleeves at once. Now around the upper part of the sleeve, I'm going in to measure 9 inches, which is about half of my round sleeve plus almost 4 inches, and then I went 4 inches down, and now I'm just going to extend my sleeves to the hem, just flare it out basically because I want it to be wider towards the bottom. And now I'm going ahead to draw that armhole curve just using my free hand, as you guys can see, connecting it to the 4-inch point that I marked. And now I'm just going in to see that I have enough for the armhole measurements that I measured earlier. And one last thing I decided to do was make one part of the sleeve shorter, so I measured 3 inches up by that point there by the fold line, and I'm just going ahead to cut it out, as you guys can see. And after doing that, I'm going ahead to cut out my sleeve. So there I have my 2 sleeves with the asymmetric detail. So now to connect this to our body, so the main robe, I'm just going to mark the middle point of the sleeve and connect it to the shoulder seam over there. So I'll pin it down, pin everything in place before taking it to my sewing machine to sew. So after pinning it down, I'm just taking it to my sewing machine to sew. So just take your time because you're sewing like 2 curves together, so this can be a bit tricky. So now I'm going ahead to measure about 1 inch for my belt loop. So over there, I'm just going to fold it that way and then fold it again and then fold it onto itself like that to create the belt loop. So now I'll divide that in 2 because I just made a long string, so I'll use that for both sides of my robe. Now to join the side seams together, I'm just going to pin the underarm point, making sure that the sleeves are lined when we go ahead to sew this. So for this, you just want to take your time and pin it down, and then I'll also go ahead and pin the pockets together just to make sure this also aligns when we sew it down, and also pin the rest of the sides together. So just pin it down, this way it's easier for you to just sew when you take it to your sewing machine. So you sew along the sleeve, along the side, along the pocket like that, and then sew it down. Now for the belt loop, I'll measure 3 inches above that pocket point, which is my waist, remember, because for my waist I went 3 inches down, and then I'll just fold my loop in 2 that way, and place it inside the robe like so, like you guys can see, and then pin it down. So when I take it to my sewing machine and sew it down, my loop is in place. So now that all that is done, I've taken it to my sewing machine and I'm sewing it all down. So yeah, I'm just sewing along the pocket like I explained, as you guys can see me doing here. And once I get to the end, I'll lift my sewing machine up and then connect it back to my body and just continue sewing down. So that's all done, and at this point I was like, I should have actually lifted the pocket a little bit up because the pocket felt a little low, so maybe 1 inch below the waist would have been fine. So now to create the lapel, I'm just going ahead to measure the open front from one end to the other, and then I'll cut out a fabric the length of that strip, but I'm just joining it together because I couldn't cut a long strip of fabric. And now I'm just folding my back in half to determine my center back point because I'll be using that to connect my lapel. So I will join the middle of the lapel to the fabric, just pin everything down and then go ahead and sew it. So for the lapel, I made it to 5 inches wide by the length of the open front, so I folded it in 2. So after folding, it's about 2.5 inch, and I used 1/2 inch as sewing allowance. Now for my belt, I just cut a long strip of fabric about 5 inches wide and folded it in 2. And now I'll just go ahead to create that bow like effect that I like on both sides. So I'm just cutting like a rectangle, a triangle rather, And now I'll fold it in half and go ahead to sew along the length of the open length of the belt. So for this, just make sure to leave, you know, some space in the middle so you can turn the belt outside. You can turn it inside out when you're done, as you guys can see me doing here. And then go ahead and close the open bit that you left. Don't forget to close that, guys. And that's it. The very last step is to finish the hem, so the sleeve hem and the hem of the robe, and our robe is ready. Easy, right? So this is the end result of the robe. I really like it. I think it's just really nice to wear indoors, especially because we're spending so much time at home these days. I just wanted to make something that felt really nice and sexy. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.